I'm going to call the April 14th Judiciary Committee meeting to order. We're here tonight to discuss a petition that was presented to the council on LGBT rights. I had all of you sign in the sign-in list and mark whether you wish to speak or not. And I'm going to go down through the list one by one and such. And then when we get to the end, there may be some short comments made. I would appreciate if you keep your remarks to 5 minutes. We have a large crowd and I want everybody to have the opportunity to speak. Please address your comments to the committee. State your name and residence address as we are recording it. It should turn on. And please do not repeat statements made by others, but do state if you agree or disagree. I thought perhaps if Mr. Turner was here, he would like to start as he presented the petition, and I'll let him speak first, and then we'll go down through the list.
Lady and gentlemen of the committee, are there two of you?
There's 4 of us.
Four, you're all
Dan Nye, Sweet Trodson, Bill Schaefer, and Lynn Winstead.
Lady and gentlemen, could you give your name and residence? Yeah, Richard Turner, 335 South Dakota Street, Dillon. I was the person who proposed an anti-discrimination ordinance in the meeting of February 19th. I don't know if we need to summarize that, but basically what I asked for in an ordinance would be protection for LGBT people, that is lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender, against discrimination in employment, in housing, and in public accommodations. I think it's worth noting that other cities have adopted such ordinances, and there have been no reported problems connected with them. I don't know the process here. I don't know whether this is the first of several discussions or what.
At this point, we'll see how it goes this evening and then see where it takes us.
Speaking of how it goes this evening, I hope this doesn't devolve into a kind of emotional discussion about I hate gays, I love gays. Right? This isn't whether you are in favor of homosexuality per se, or opposed to it. This is about an ordinance to protect people who may not be just like you, who may live their lives differently than you do, who may love other people than you do. So, I hope that's clear. I think in the context of what's going on in the world with respect to homosexuals, it's important to note that anti-homosexuality has recently become quite virulent in the world. If you saw the Winter Olympics, you may have noticed that Vladimir Putin had an anti-homosexual program that was enforced by thugs outside the Olympic venues. Homosexuals were beaten with the approval of the government by goons in the streets. In Uganda, an African country where evangelical Christians from this country have had great sway, it was recently going to be a law that homosexuals be put to death. That has been softened since to homosexuals will be put in prison. So there are a number of countries, Cuba's another one that has severe restrictions on homosexuality. So if you have heard the arguments against homosexuality, those same arguments, and you agree with them, you're agreeing with Vladimir Putin, you're agreeing with a repressive government in Uganda who would put homosexuals to death if they could. You are agreeing with the communist country of Cuba and numerous other not very evolved countries. I won't repeat the proposal that I read unless you want me to. Okay. So having said that, I guess I'll sit down and listen to what others say.
All right, the first person I have on the list is Reverend Sue Eads. Is it Eads?
Eads. I just would like to
State your name and
I'm
address.
sorry, my name is Sue Eads. I live at 218 East Chapman Street here in Dillon. I would just like to speak in support of this ordinance. I think that there are so many different ways that we discriminate and do injustices to those whose voice we don't allow to be heard often enough. It's up to us. And I wanted this group to understand that there is a Christian group that believes in the rights of homosexuals and lesbian and gay and transgender people. That the issues around religion are not going to stop. We know that. Those debates will continue, hopefully in the right venues. But when it comes to the rights of the citizen, and that's the task that you all are called to, is to understand how you can protect the individual rights of all citizens. And in fairness and justice, I call upon you as the Judiciary Board of the City of Dillon to think about all of the people of this community and not perpetuate prejudice so that we don't take steps backwards, that we continue to move forward and care for all of the people in this community. Thank you.
Reverend Harry Neely.
Neely, Harry E., 325 South Pacific, number 4. I've come here tonight in a spirit of inclusiveness, and I see that inclusive is here tonight. There are people here who are gay, there are people here who are straight, there are people that still haven't made their minds up about their sexuality. And there are Bobcat fans and Grizzly fans and all sorts of Christians here. But I come here in that spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood with those who believe in the Lord Jesus Christ. And to me, that's very inclusive. It includes all kinds of people. It's real easy to follow into that age-old trap of demonizing people. We've been doing it for centuries and hundreds, millennia, setting aside people and saying they're not like us, therefore they're outside of our society. And that's what we want to avoid. We don't need to demonize people. We don't need to say people are people that believe differently from us or think or live differently for us. We don't need to do that. It would be very easy for this council, if they proceed on this matter, to keep on operating on the basis of separating themselves from a significant portion of the Beaverhead community. Wake up. Understand what's going on in your society. I don't believe my view is the only right view to hold. And I certainly don't believe some of you have that exclusive right to know what is right and what is wrong. Tonight I choose not to engage in diatribe, accusation, or even insinuation about anybody, about Richard Turner or anyone else who is here tonight. I won't do that. I just want to bring to public attention, and particularly to the members of the community, this community and this committee, what it means to be marginalized. I lived through that civil rights moment in the 60s and marched and had all kinds of things going on back in the 60s when I was a young seminarian and a young priest. And it wasn't easy to get black people accepted in this country. People had to bleed and die for it. We ought to think about Martin Luther King, who his assassination was just celebrated last week. One of those people who was treated as less than fully human, less deserving of every civil right granted by word and implication in this nation's Declaration of Independence. There's so much sad history in this country of disallowing full participation in this country's life. And I hate to think the beautiful county of Beaverhead would be one of those who would perpetuate separating out a segment of our society and castigating them. The promise of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness doesn't have an exception clause. It doesn't say it excludes me or you or any of us. It's all of us. I think the need for civility and common law in terms of acceptance of people that need hasn't disappeared. Some of you by this point are saying that this man doesn't know Jesus, never known Jesus, never will know him. But the one that I try to follow is the one that had his arms on a cross. And I think that's very important. He was holding his arms out to me and to you and to every human being. He didn't say because you're black or you're a Catholic or a Baptist or an Episcopalian.
You have about 1 minute.
Or I'm well aware of the time.
Okay.
Or the gay. He didn't say, I didn't die for you. He died for all of us. I think this is a major understanding to drink in and fully practice, and I hope we're being led forward to a more caring, more aware of the suffering of other people, more committed to the dignity of each and every single person. And I think this committee, in granting this recognition in Dillon, is, to me, a recognition that we care fully and deeply about the dignity of every human being. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Watkins.
Don Watkins. I represent Mountain Man Pottery at 34 North Idaho.
Would you give your residence address?
My residence is at 211 North Lane. So, let's do a little bit of history here. In the United States, we already have many federal governances that ensure no discrimination. These include the 15th and 19th Amendments, guaranteeing voting rights, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Age Discrimination Act of 1975, and the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990, and there's many others. Perhaps the most pertinent to these proceedings is the Fair Housing Act of 1968. In that act, protections are given to ensure against discrimination toward any protected class. These classes are based on federal guidelines that supersede all state and local controls. What this means is sufficient protections are already in place by a government with resources to enforce them. In Colorado, there was a case of the State versus Masterpiece Cake Shop. Probably most of you have heard of it. This case has gone all the way up the chain, and just recently the United States Supreme Court refused to hear it. These events are not without cost to the state of Colorado. They've had to have the Colorado Civil Rights Commission to enforce their law. They've had to have their attorneys to prosecute. And in this case, they've had to have attorneys to defend against countersuits. In New Mexico, there's the case of Elaine Photography versus Willick. This case is still in the court system. Elaine Photography has free help from the Alliance of Defending Freedom. This leaves New Mexico with the cost of defending itself. This can be a very expensive issue. It is best handled at the federal or at least at the state level. A city with as limited resources as Dillon has no business risking what we have for an issue that already has sufficient federal protection. Furthermore, some states have even gone in the opposite direction and enacted laws protecting religious stances. Mississippi has such a law. Arizona passed one, which was then vetoed by their government. Other states, including Ohio, Indiana, Georgia, Maine, South Dakota, Tennessee, and Idaho, have similar pending bills. In Montana, were it to follow suit and such a bill were to pass, we would find ourselves in an awkward position of having an ordinance that's opposed to a state law. This would result in further costs to the city of Dillon on further actions to remedy this situation. This is an issue that is best left to both the state and federal jurisdictions.
Thank you. Eric Van Dalen said possibly wanted to speak.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Eric Van Dalen. My residence is 187 Trista Drive. Ladies and gentlemen of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak. I would like to suggest that we let other towns and communities be the guinea pigs for this. this legislation, this bill, and let's see a 5 to 10 year track record and have it analyzed by an unbiased third party. And then we can revisit this. I'm an employer, and I'm in and out of homes and businesses daily, and I will not hire one of those folks and deface my business and back my customers into a corner and possibly make them feel uncomfortable. Thank you for letting me speak.
Dale Stewart.
My name's Dale Stewart, 711 Sunset West in Dillon. So thank you for allowing me to make these comments. So there's a few things I'm concerned about. First of all, I just want to address some of the comments made. I think everybody in the room, and me in particular, speak for myself. I don't want to see discrimination against anybody. I think I am against all this killing around the world just because people are gay or lesbian, and I'm not for that at all. I am against this ordinance for a few reasons. One, there was a comment made that this is a very significant population in our county, but according to the 2012 Census Bureau, and I wrote this in a letter to the council, that according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 0.01% of our population of Beaverhead County claims to be gay or lesbian or transgender. And so it's a very small percent that this ordinance would really seem to protect. I've talked to several people from all walks of life, the college students and people, older folks, younger folks, and especially on the college campus. I asked their view. I said, what is the view of the gay and lesbian lifestyle on campus? And they said, nobody cares. You're straight, or you're gay, or you're married, or you're not married, or you're cheating because you're married, or you're cheating with a single person. They said it really doesn't matter. There's no discrimination that's going on. In fact, again, I referenced this in a letter earlier, that to date there has not been any discrimination cases brought to in the state of Montana in the position that we're talking about. So again, it seems like this is an ordinance that isn't really needed in Dillon at this time. Another issue that I have, several issues, are just the legality of this ordinance. Is Dillon a self-governing entity in itself, and does Dillon have the self-governing powers to enact an ordinance like this and to enforce an ordinance like this? It's been mentioned already tonight that it does go against some state law in regards to this. So I would just question whether Dillon could even put this into place and enforce it. If we look at the ordinance that have been passed in other cities, and I've got a copy of the Butte ordinance in my hand, it's very interesting that the wording they use is that the perceived discrimination. It's not that you actually have to be discriminated against, just perceived that you are. And another troubling word is the word, what's the word? Express. That's it. I didn't read it. You can express yourself. And so that's concerning to me, that if I'm a straight person today, tomorrow I could express myself as a gay person, or the next day I could express myself as a transgender person. And this brings up an issue of who is going to be the thought police in Dillon. How will a business know how I am expressing myself when I walk into their business, so that I am not being discriminated against? And so it just opens up a lot of can of worms. I have, I think, Mr. Dillon, I gave you a memorandum of, or I dropped it off at the mayor's office. He said he was going to give it to you, and I hope that happened, from Missoula. And there's some legal concerns from the attorney there. I also have, I'd like to present after the meeting, or didn't get that? Okay.
Sorry, no.
I'd like to give that to you to look at. These are some lawyers, attorneys from the Missoula case that have some legal issues. And then also the attorney in the Bozeman case has done a legal analysis with some of those.
You have a copy you could
Yes,
give us?
if I could just give those
Just
to
pass
you
it on
to
up.
look at. And I've got copies of these, so I know it's a lot in there tonight, but there's some other attorneys around the state that are, again, having some issues in regards to how we settle this on a city issue in regards to the state issue. So
Where did you turn it in?
I gave the one to the mayor one day when I stopped in, and he said he was going to have a meeting with the city attorney, but it's been busy, so
Well, we've
I
got it now,
apologize.
so
Yep.
we've got it
And if you need more copies, I can get that.
We'll
So,
be good.
all right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thomas and Becky Miller didn't put yes or no. Do they wish to speak?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Sheila Roberts.
That's me. I'm Sheila Roberts, 102 East Dillon Street here in town. And I'm speaking very briefly in favor of this ordinance. I think that I have friends and I have known students on campus who definitely have been discriminated against in this town. And if you think that that's not happening, it's probably because you don't know people who trust you to be able to speak about it. Many of them are afraid of this community in that way. And I think probably that the best evidence we need to look at the need for this ordinance is the people who have come here to speak against it. We have indeed, as we heard, had a series of ordinance, laws, amendments passed in this country to support a series of different groups of people who have been discriminated against. And as we go through that, if anybody, we keep finding people who are indeed being discriminated against. The reasons for these ordinances, the reason for it, as far as I'm concerned, is that this community has an opportunity to say, we accept the diversity that is already here, and we believe that all citizens should have the same rights. If you don't believe that, you come here to speak against it. But you are presenting us the evidence for the need for this when you speak against it.
Thank you. Kendra Madney.
I'm Kendra Madney of 657 Bobsters Drive, and my comments will be brief since most of them have been expressed. For the record, I'm not for discriminating against the people that are in the LGBT group, nor do I think that anybody else that's not in the LGBT group should ever be discriminated against. However, I also believe, as some have spoke, that if you're going to be making ordinances, they really need to be good ordinances and in accordance with the law. And as Mr. Stewart mentioned, the ordinances that Missoula, Helena, and Butte appear to be very similar. In fact, probably copies of one another except for the names of the local jurisdiction. The one from Butte says that if there's a complaint, it should go through the civil proceeding within the jurisdiction of the Butte Silver Bow Justice Court. So that is implying that they are going to deal with it themselves. However, there is also Montana law stating that if there is a complaint that has to do with a human right issue, it should be through the Human Rights Commission that's centered in Helena. And so therefore, this kind of ordinance passed by a local area would go against a state law. So I guess I would have to say I'm against this type of ordinance. Thank you.
Fred Fletcher, you just didn't mark whether you wanted to speak or not. Do you wish to speak? Sean Dickens.
I'm Sean Dickens, 57 Roberts Road here in Dillon. I normally wouldn't speak about this, but there's been a couple of comments that were made that I want to go ahead and say something. I would be against an ordinance like this for the simple fact that I'm a business owner, and things like this have a tendency to turn into free-for-alls for lawsuits to happen. If an individual comes to me and wants a job, I could care less who they are, what race they are, what grade level they've passed. It doesn't interest me. All I'm interested in is, can you do the job? And if an individual that I decide that can't really do the job is for or against whatever this ordinance says, they can come back and sue me and say, that I discriminated against them because of their sexual beliefs. That's not right. If we want to get down to the nitty-gritty about it, I'm a white male in the United States. And as any business owner that's a white male knows, we are the most discriminated against. If I want to go get a government contract, I can't get that government contract because I'm a white male. If I'm a woman, if I am a Latino, if I am a black or any other race, I move to the top of the list. So, and I don't look for any preferential treatment. I don't go in and say, we need to pass an ordinance that says that because I'm a white male, I should get bumped to the top of the list. That doesn't interest me. So I think that things like this become very dangerous, especially for business owners or landlords or anybody else that's put into that position where someone walks in and the sue-happy nature of people in this country now is that if they don't like the hat you're wearing or the coat that you're wearing, they'll sue you and they get away with it. So I think it's something that we need to seriously consider long and hard before that kind of power is put into play.
Thank you. Paul Peck.
Thank you for letting me speak, and
Give your name and your resident address, please.
yeah, I'll do that. My name is Paul Peck. I live on Horse Prairie, but I pastor a church at 1030 East Seabreeze. And we have a pretty good sized group there, and I would like you to understand that in my reading of the Bible, and I've read a lot of times, a lot of Christian people get kind of mixed up on stuff, and there's the passage in the Gospel of John, chapter 3, verse 17. Everybody seems to know verse 16, but verse 17 says, "For God sent not his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved." It is not my plan. I have never preached that. In fact, I have preached at our church that we need to love everybody, and we need to learn to like everybody. I have gay and lesbian people in my family. Living on Horse Prairie, there's a person up there who is a gay person, good friend of mine, good friend of my wife. We've loaned cars, we've done all different kinds. He picked cherries for us in return and so on. I have nothing against any of this, but I am against setting aside a small group of people and giving them special preferential treatment, because, you know, we have the best law enforcement in this town and in this county that I've ever seen. I've lived here 30 years, and it's amazing. It's amazing what they do. And I don't think anybody, if they made it public, could get away with discriminating or hurting another person. I don't think that'll happen. I haven't seen, by the way, I have 2 children I've adopted from Ethiopia, black, and 2 children from Cambodia, Asian. They have grown up here, and you know what? Nothing. Nobody's been mean to them. Nobody's discriminated against them. In fact, my daughter worked at Safeway, and everybody loves her. And she's an African American, and an American African actually. But you got to get it straight. But anyway, I understand the difficulty that you all are facing. But this is America. We all have the right. And I know if I see someone's rights violated, that is a gay or a lesbian person or somebody picking on them, I'm going to step in. I'm going to help them, protect them, do whatever I can. And we've used our church building for funerals, for gay, lesbian people, and so on. So, you know, we're loving. We're not hating. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Ken Scheibel.
Thank you for letting me speak. speak. I'm just addressing this a little bit from a landlord
Give me your
perspective.
address.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1117 Nissen Lane. I have some rentals in town, so I guess that's why I'm speaking. But I've seen cases, and this has been addressed a little bit earlier, where somebody be renting to a gay and lesbian person, and then something goes wrong. And in my case, in 30 years, I've only had 3 people I've ever had to leave. Lynn was not one of them.
Yeah, I was extended for a while.
But, you know, I never questioned their sexuality. That was never a concern of mine. But it is a concern of mine because I've heard of cases where that has been used as a club, as is really spoken, in order to prevent them from being evicted or whatever the case may be, for reasons other than their sexuality. And I think this goes across the board to other concerns as well. And I mirror some of the other folks here too, that it's not at all about disrespecting their lifestyle or anything like that. It's, as the Bible says, we're all sinners before God, so thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I think it's Penny Shike?
Psych. No.
No, okay. Jesse Vaccaro?
Yes, ma'am. My name is Jesse Vaccaro, and I live here in town, but I own property at 500 Jason Lane. That's a little out of town. Most of the points that I was going to present have already been presented, but I would like to reiterate the fact that there are already ordinances that have been set up at the state level to protect against discrimination. So for the city of Dillon to try to set up an ordinance that would seem to supersede at the state level, it's not really our jurisdiction or position to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Levon Brillhart?
Good evening. I'm Levon Brillhart. I live at 228 West Morris here in Dillon. And there seems to be so much hate in the world. We all belong to the human race, and if we're going to stay in the race, we can't exclude people.
Valerie Cloutier?
Hi, my name is Valerie Coulter, and I live at 219 Atlantic Street. I'm relatively new to Dillon here, and I'm hoping to make it my home for a while. I am in support of this ordinance. I've lived in Missoula and lived there when we passed the ordinance to have equal protection for LGBTQ members of our community. I think this is an important piece of legislation, or whatever you call it, because it's important to remember that just because we all say that we're for everybody's rights and equal rights, the reality is, and history teaches us, that it doesn't play out that way. And as a gentleman over there spoke just a minute ago, said that he would not hire someone who was gay because he did not like the way it looked in his business, and the gentleman right after him said that we don't discriminate, that no one would discriminate against somebody, but that was a clear representation of discrimination. And I hope that didn't escape anybody else. I think it's really important that we recognize that everybody has their own beliefs and their own lifestyles and their own choices, and some of those choices are not necessarily choices. You might consider them choices, but your sexual orientation is actually a biological consideration. It's not a choice you make. And people do need to be protected. So yeah, that's what I have to say. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you. John Madney?
I guess one of the things that bothers me is how...
Your name and address.
I was going to say my... 657 Fox Ridge Drive.
Could you say, repeat that? I couldn't hear that.
657 Fox Ridge Drive. It seems like there's a couple things being said here. One is the questioning the ordinance, and the other is, I think it's close to unanimous that we don't want the discrimination. And one of the things that I really like about being in a position is that I'm free, that I'm not asked to discriminate. I mean, it's sort of like, and I often, and I appreciate that because I can just listen and help anybody who walks through the door. But I guess that we have to look at some of the implications of what laws can do and how they can make it awkward for business, people in business to be able to manage their employees and et cetera. So, but anyway, I think that the thing here is to more look at what the law, how it's worded, and whether or not it fits in with state law, and accept that the majority of us are definitely do not want to see discrimination. And that, I think, is sort of the two different sides here. Isn't, are you for discrimination or against? Is like, is that a good piece of legislation?
I don't think I missed anyone, but I will open it up for just a few minutes if there's anyone that wishes to speak. Just hold up your hand. Mr. Turner?
Turner, yes. Just as a rejoinder, I'd like to point out that in fact, under state law, it is perfectly legal in Montana to discriminate against a homosexual in housing and in business and in public accommodations. Last year, an attempt was made to protect the civil rights of homosexuals in the legislature. It was defeated. So we do not have state protections. That needs to be understood. A second thing to understand is that in the absence of any legislation protecting homosexuals, of course there are no complaints being made. You can't make a complaint about your rights being violated if they haven't been legally. It's legal right now to violate the housing, employment, and public accommodation status of homosexuals in Montana. That's the way it is. Certain cities, Missoula, Butte, have decided to take it upon themselves to ensure their local residents protection, even though the state has refused to offer those protections.
Go ahead and stand up and state your name and address.
I'm Elizabeth Simonson. I live on 39 Buffalo. I may only be 13, but I know me, along with many of my friends, want to know that we can grow up not being discriminated for what any of us are, and we want to live in a world where which no one will be rejected for who they truly are. And not only this, but I did a research paper less than 2 weeks ago, and people will just be discriminated for what they're genetically made of. It is not a choice. And me and quite a few other teenagers feel that we don't want to grow up living where people are being discriminated against for how they're made.
Thank you, Ms. Simonson. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Ken?
Yeah, I just want to address the comment that Mr. Turner made. I haven't read the statute for a long time, but as a landlord, I recall reading, I think he's misplaced his information, because from what I remember reading, it's definitely against state law and the stuff that I have read that has been disseminated to me as a landlord. So I just want to clarify that.
Yes. Yes.
Greg Cornell, 716 South Washington. I'm not saying I'm for or against this this piece of legislative doohickey, but I don't know enough about it to say one way or the other. I guess I would kind of go with the fact that we need to look at what the implications are with businesses, and does it tie their hands and take some of their right to choose and right to run their business. I mean, we don't need government telling the small businesses how to run their small businesses, or else we're going to have more vacant businesses in these small towns. And businesses are very important, as long as the people and the people that are in the businesses are very important. So as a previous business owner, I really didn't like when government kept throwing regulations at us when it seemed like good business owners could make good decisions. And if a business owner is segregative and makes bad decisions towards people, they seem like they create their own tragedy. We don't need to, make a tragedy for somebody that is that way. And if you say, I can't hire a gay person because I don't want them to deface my property or deface my business and give it a bad viewpoint. That's bad business, and I think that will show with this customer list. Same thing, you know, you can't have a black working. You know, they're some of the greatest people. I like to judge people on who they are and their work ethic and their morals versus a color or a race or a sexual orientation. And I don't know if we need right now to jump on a bandwagon on something that's just kind of getting started. Let's see how that rolls out in these bigger cities. I guess I don't like passing something that we don't understand totally and haven't seen the implementations on both sides, whether it is good for the gays or bad for the business or good for the business or good for everybody. We don't know that yet. Let's let it run its course. We passed healthcare, and I don't know if we totally understand what we passed, whether it's good or bad. There's good things to it, and there's some very bad things, but we got to let it go and run its course. And I don't know what the right answer is here today. I mean, there's everybody here, and I'm pretty impressed that we're all very civilized. And I think the biggest thing I could say is that we need more education and understand how it is. And I know when I'm around gay people, whether it's a convention or a lunch or a party, I feel very uncomfortable being around gay people because I don't want to offend them. You know, I'm worried about what I would do to offend them. I don't know if anyone else feels that way. It's not that they make me uncomfortable, it's that I don't want to make them uncomfortable. And some of them are good friends of mine, and I'm afraid that I might do something that I think is all right, but they may not think so. So I guess you know, let's just move forward and try to figure out what the right answer is here. And I don't know what it is. You know, I can't say it's good or bad or for or against, but I don't want to see any more hardship towards businesses and companies by taking, let's say there is some kind of a right taken away by giving someone else a right. So what is the right answer? The right answer is, you know, ideal thing, and life isn't ideal, and I don't know where we go from here.
I would just like to remind everybody here.
State your name.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sue Eads, 218 East Chapman. That this ordinance is in protection of those whom we as a society have failed to give any voice to. And as I'm sitting here listening, what I'm hearing is this ordinance now has been switched to save those who have no voice, to protect the poor businessmen. And I'm a little bit frustrated, I have to say, because I think that there is a lot of prejudice that has been crouched in rhetoric tonight. And I just think that in order for us to do the right thing, we need to remember whom it is that we are trying to serve and care for here, that it is the marginalized in our community. And as this woman here very eloquently told us, oh yes, discrimination is happening. It is happening. Now we can put our head in the sand and pretend it's not happening, and then, or choose not to do anything about it, or we can ask you to please don't pass this ordinance because we're afraid that we might get in trouble because we're not going to give a gay or a lesbian a job or let them serve in our Sunday schools or whatever, but they still have a right to be protected. You know, laws come about because of an issue. That's why we make laws, because for some reason, somewhere along the way, something has happened that has caused us to say there's a great need for this. And I think that's probably why this ordinance came about to begin with. And it's not just Dillon, we're seeing it happen throughout the state. And so I think we need to sit back really and think about who are the marginalized in our community. How might I personally have helped to keep them disenfranchised and marginalized in this community? And instead of just pushing ahead our own agenda, let's begin to think about those people. And remember, that's what this ordinance is about. It's not about punishing business owners or landlords or anyone else. It's not about that. It's about standing up for what is right.
My name is Jim Gross. I live at 8 South Nevada Street here in town. I guess my biggest concern is because I've heard two people giving legal counsel, so to speak, and we've got a city attorney. I mean, this isn't something that's just come up, so I would think he'd be able to tell us what the state law is, I would think.
Okay.
And I think that that would be very helpful.
I will answer that at this point. What we decided to do, because this is a very complicated issue, as all of you can understand and hear tonight, was that we wanted to hear the input from everyone in the community to see what people felt and thought about the issues. I had asked Mr. Dillon to look into the issue briefly, but what will happen at this time is we will sit back, think about this for a few days, and call for another meeting. I will ask Mr. Dillon to do some research into the law, as he is the expert, and then we'll address this a little further. This is not something to be taken lightly or done overnight. It is a complicated issue. I do want to say that I will accept written comments until next Monday the 21st. So if you didn't feel like speaking, please, send them into City Hall, or our emails are on the website. But I will also say we will not pay any attention to anonymous mail. So at this point,
Tom Miller. We have a business at 15 Ramshorn, and my wife and I live at 1250 Kerrigan Lane. I want to ask the committee a question. Would it be helpful if you saw a show of hands of who are in favor of this tonight and who are against this ordinance tonight, so that it help you make a decision?
I really would prefer not to poll the audience. I would like to just consider the comments that have been made.
Okay.
I think that's a more fairer way to do this.
Thank you.
And such. It's a good idea, but not at this point. I think we've got kind of comments both directions that have to be considered deeply. And this is not an ordinance that's going to be written overnight, if it's written at all. So unless there's any other comment that's different than what we've heard.
Paul Peck, and I live out on Horseberry, but I work in a church here. And I would like to ask if we have gay and lesbian people with us who have a voice, and they have expressed their opinion in this group, and who doesn't have a voice. Dillon, I have found to be a very fair community, and if somebody's bugging you, talk to these people about it, or talk to our chief of police or whatever, because you'll get some help. You will. And you have a voice here. Feel free to speak. This is America. Thank you.
Is there anything the committee would like to ask from? Have a movement for adjournment, do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you everyone for coming and expressing your points of view. We will think of them very seriously.